Greetings to everyone. Thank you for joining us for our session today. It is almost 5 past, and I think we can start. Anyone else who joins can catch up with us. We don't have a very long time for the session. So welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for joining us and being part of our session today. So my name is Bongiwe Simka from ICLEI Africa. I work within ICLEI's biodiversity, nature, and health workstream based in Cape Town, South Africa, and also a part of the Integrated Action on Biodiversity Interact Bio for Short project, which is hosting this webinar today. So I welcome all of you. Thank you for joining us for this session. Just a brief background. So this session forms part of our 6-part webinar series for the project that focuses on mainstreaming nature and biodiversity across city scales with a focus on the local and subnational level. So the 6-part series is basically creating a platform for peer learning, knowledge exchange within the global south. And this forms the 6th webinar that we're hosting within that 6-part series. So welcome to everyone. I hope you enjoy this discussion today, which focuses on natural capital accounting and ecosystem accounts specifically, and their role in mainstreaming biodiversity across different scales. So I think as a form of slight introduction, I think we've all seen a rapid decline in biodiversity globally, with current systems mainly prioritizing immediate economic gains at the expense of degrading biodiversity. And despite biodiversity underpinning livelihoods and economies globally, ecosystem services are not completely valued as yet, and current estimates show that approximately 44% of global economies are at risk from nature loss. And as a result, now more than ever, there's a need to transition towards economies that put nature first and prioritize the restoration and the rehabilitation and protection of ecosystems. So this includes putting new approaches and tools at the forefront for accounting for the value of biodiversity in driving and sustaining economies and livelihoods globally. And in line with that, natural capital accounting is like an evolving field that seeks to manage our natural resources and ecosystems through accounting for what natural assets in the form of natural stock and how they are being used and managed over time. So what this webinar will focus on is basically demonstrating how natural capital accounting, ecosystem accounts, can be used as a tool to effectively mainstream biodiversity into planning, into policy, and decision-making across multiple scales. And we'll be doing that with some case studies from across the global south, namely China, South Africa, and India. Next slide, please, Jade. And I think before we actually start and get into the discussion for today, we'll be sharing a few housekeeping rules. I think everybody's mic, apart from the panelists, are muted, but you'll be given the opportunity to engage when the Q&A and session begins later today. We also are recording the session, and by taking part, you are consenting to being recorded. Please make use of the Q&A box to post your questions and comments throughout the session. We will have a dedicated Q&A section session later after we've had our presentations, where we'll give people the opportunity to engage with our speakers and engage in the discussion as well. We've also provided some simultaneous interpretation throughout the session for Chinese, Spanish, and Portuguese speakers. There is an interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom platform. You're welcome to use that to access the interpretation throughout the session. And I think lastly, we'll be sharing a post-session survey and ask that people do contribute to that at the end of the session. Next slide, please, Jade. Okay. Thanks. And I think what we'll be doing for today's session is doing a bit of a brief welcome and introduction, which I'm doing now, and then we'll dive into the actual content and the focus of our discussion today, We'll be hearing some insights and some lessons from China, South Africa, and India in terms of the NCA program of work and how they've been able to develop within those portfolios. We'll also have a dedicated question and answer session to give people the opportunity to engage with our speakers, engage in the discussion, and also share some of your own insights and your experiences within the discussion today. Next slide, please, Jade. And I think just to somewhat set the scene a bit, I did mention earlier that this webinar series forms part of a 6-part webinar series as part of the Integrated Action on Biodiversity Project, Interact Bio Project for short. So a bit of a background in terms of the Interact Bio Project. So the Interact Bio Project started in 2017 and is a Global South initiative that is funded by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety, and is implemented in Brazil, Tanzania, India, South Africa, China, and Colombia. Next slide, please. And the aim of the project basically is about strengthening biodiversity mainstreaming across multiple scales with a specific focus on the subnational level. And we've been doing this through connecting different stakeholders and decision makers together in terms of how best to integrate biodiversity considerations into city region planning and decision making, strengthening capacity building and knowledge sharing and exchange, and also just creating platforms for cross-sectoral engagement and mainstreaming of biodiversity. And hence the relevance of this webinar and some of the other webinars that we've hosted as part of the project. And I think just to actually get to the focus of today's discussion, what I'll do is just introduce our speakers. As I said earlier, our webinar today focuses on natural capital accounting and the role of accounts in mainstreaming biodiversity across multiple scales and ensuring biodiversity mainstreaming at the cross-sectoral level as well. And that will be done through our 3 speakers who've joined us today. Dr. Beilong Han, who's joining us from China, Amy Ginsberg, who is joining us, who is sharing some South African insights, but I'm not sure if she's joining us from South Africa today. And we also have Dr. Punamita Dasgupta, who will be sharing insights from India as well. And I think before I start taking up most of the webinar session, I will hand over to Dr. Beilong to share your insights. What I'll do is allow all our speakers to share from their sides and give you control of your presentation, if that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for the invitation from ICLEI Beijing. And this is a great chance for me to sharing what we had done at China and learn more about case studies from Global South. And today I will, make the window smaller. Today I want to sharing a few of cases that we used a new index called GEP in China. And it's fantastic. At the very beginning, it's scientific research, and finally we can push the scientific results into local policy decision makers' decision for sustainable cities. So this GEP is equal to the sum of our final ecosystem services at their exchange value supplied by all ecosystem system types located within an ecosystem accounting area over an accounting period, which usually will be accounting for a whole year. And it's less the net import of intermediate services. So that's the identification I just copied from the ICEEA framework, which was released at 2021 by UN. This framework tells us that GEP was involved in this framework as a flow of ecosystem service accounting. And it was also recommended to the SDG goals for 2050. You can see the sentence I highlight here. that in 2050 goals, nature's contribution to people which have been valued, maintained, or enhanced through conservation and sustainable use. So that's what happened in the whole world, that the GEP may becoming a new index for us to do in natural capital accounting area. And in China, what was included in the GEP system? GEP, the full name is Gross Ecosystem Product. Well, actually, they divided all those products into three camps. First is the material service, second is regulating services, and the third is non-material service, or we call cultural services in China. And if you want to get more details, you can search this article, which was read by Ouyang Jun and other colleagues of me. And the last year has a match of last year, Chinese government, which is the National Development and Reform Commission and our National Bureau of Statistics, released a technical guide for the GEP. And this booklet includes more than 200 pages, full of mathematics. But at the very beginning, it introduced the principle that how to use GEP. I had highlighted the sentence. It is a GEP of the administrative unit, which is for a whole city, is for examination of the government performance and equal compensation distribution. So that's why the cases I taught that the local government, I will taught local government to take so serious about this index. That's because from the top to the bottom, local decision makers think GEP care more about their position in the office rank. And also some provinces and important cities have released their own technical guides for GEP accounting, such as Beijing, the capital of China, and the Zhejiang province, Jiangxi province, and the Guangdong province. The first case I want to introduce happened in China is Shenzhen. Shenzhen is a very urbanized coastal city, which neighbored with Hong Kong, with more than 17 million population and more than 50 billion USD GDP at the year 2020. It's a very urbanized areas. And the Shenzhen's government released its GEP accounting system, which is 3+1. 3 means 3 technical support means. First is local government released their GEP accounting technical guidance, tell people how to calculate GEP. And the second is they built a static mechanism to collect all the data they need for GEP accounting. And the third is they built a software platform for people to calculate GEP with its professional software even more easily. And the last one is the Shenzhen government released an implement plan, which involved more than 20 different departments from government to support data, to upload their data for this city's gross ecosystem product accounting. And for its accounting technical guidance, Shenzhen involved more ecosystem service, which has more close relationship with peoples, such as physical health and traffic noise abatement services, and even include the premium estate from nature view. And that's the first page of its static mechanism. And this is the software. Because of the time is limited, I won't show the software with too much details. That's the result. Central government has keeping release their cities GEP for 3 years, since 2020 and 2021 and 2022. For these 3 years, they released their GEP officially. And we can see the change of GEP for this city. Because of the COVID-19 reason, For this city's culture services value goes down, but for the whole city, it's still a good news that their regulation services are still keep increasing. And furthermore, they use GEP to valuing the benefit of nature-based solutions, such as their skinning green space and green roof. They value their green spaces, how much values those green space service for their civilians. And also they use the result of GEP to help them make a decision where they should give more ecosystem protection and which place they could have more development action. That's the first case happened at Shenzhen, and still we have a few cases happened at Beijing. This is the tourism plan at the wide area of Beijing. At the very beginning, this plan will cause a regulation, decreasing of regulation for almost 64% of regulation service. And the government found this problem. They asked the designer, this tourism project designer, to redesign their plan. And finally, they have an increasing of the whole project. Their regulation service don't go decrease, but increasing almost 37%. And also, this is a sub-district of Beijing. Since the GEP accounting include more than 10 different ecosystem services, each services are maps as a result. So when we overlap all the maps together, we can take in for each villages their advantage industry. Such for some villages, they are good at ecosystem production, and other villages, they may be good at tourism. So different villages have their different, we call it advantage industry for their future development. So the local government can give different policies to different villages to help them building and breeding their own specific industry. And the next case happened at Beijing, belong to another sub-district named Yanqing. Last year, this Yanqing government distributed 15 million RMB as equal compensation, according to GEP's indicators. And the first part is 22.5 million RMB, which was divided because of those towns which has an increasing regulation services. And the second part is also 22.5 million RMB, which also based on those towns which have their GEP increased, no decrease. And the third one is for their critical work to keep GEP increasing. And the last case happened at Zhejiang province. It's 2 years ago. A private school will be built, and this project will occupy a woodland, and this woodland will cause a loss of more than 1,000. Oh, sorry, it's 1 million, more than 1 million RMB per year, or the loss of regulation services. And the developer gave a payment for the eco restoration as 217,000 RMB one time to pay for the loss of regulation services. You may think the payment is more or less than it lost regulation services. It's because we calculate the regulation services will happen in the next 40 years. If you will have the balance of those value of regulation service, you only need to pay 200,000 RMB to build a new woodland, and the new woodland will produce more than 100,000 RMB regulation service for each year. So that's the 5 cases I shared today. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Han, for sharing those insights from China and just showing so nicely some of the examples and how the GEP model has been used in terms of getting people to account for their contribution and the loss of biodiversity that comes from the various developments and actions within that context. So thank you very much for that. I think now we will move over to South Africa, and I will hand over to Amy Ginsberg to share some insights from the NCA portfolio and the program of work that has been undertaken in South Africa through the South African National Biodiversity Institute. Over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Ngiwe. Yeah, okay, just checking that my screen is shared. So yeah, also thank you for the invitation, and so interesting to see what's happening in China, and I'm sure India after this. So South Africa's natural capital accounting work is a bit different, and I've also taken a more of a sort of looking at mainstreaming biodiversity in particular. So let me dive in. Sorry, it's not moving. There we go. So natural capital accounting, we all know, I think it's a systematic measurement of stocks and flows of natural resources, and ecosystem accounting is one component of that. I think, oh, goodness, sorry about that. I didn't realize that I had voice notes on this, so I'm just going to quickly turn those off. Apologies, because that just won't work. I think that's the only two. Let's just start that again. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, Amy.
Great. All right, so we all, I think, know that the measurement framework is a system of environmental economic accounting, and there's a central framework which focuses on individual natural resources, minerals, water, timber, and fish as examples, and then the ecosystem accounting framework. And it's these measurement frameworks that contain the concepts and definitions and accounting rules that align and give the statistics produced through these measurement frameworks similar status to the system of national accounts. Now, South Africa has been doing work on natural capital accounting in some other way for more than 20 years. It started in the late 1990s, early 2000, on water accounts for South Africa that StatSA led. And they also ran a compendium of accounts on energy, minerals, and fisheries for a number of years. And then it was around 2014-15 that focus shifted to ecosystem accounting through the Natural Capital Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services project. That overlapped with another donor-funded project, Ecological Infrastructure for Water Security, that had a particular focus on water-related ecological infrastructure. So it's been over the last 5 to 7 years that we have been producing more ecosystem accounts and thematic accounts following the SEER ecosystem accounts. And then more recently, we are doing additional accounting work. StatSA is doing biodiversity tourism estimates, so they're busy compiling those. They're also experimenting with satellite accounts for the biodiversity economy, and they've begun work on air emission accounts. A lot of the central framework related accounts, such as energy, minerals, air emissions, are only available at a national level, and I'll reflect a bit more on that. And then we're also looking forward to future donor-funded projects that allow us to do more in this space. In South Africa, I think it's important to mention the core partners. So StatSA leads the natural capital accounting work. They are responsible for compiling and publishing accounts for the central framework. And then SANBI, which is a government agency under the Minister of Environment, and has a mandate to monitor and report on the state of biodiversity and ecosystems, support with data compilation. So we're data owners and we compile accounts. And the Ministry of Environment is also a key user of ecosystem accounts and is a data owner of many of the data layers. So reflecting on the role of natural capital accounting in mainstreaming biodiversity considerations, I refer to the definition from the Global Environment Facility, who have also been the main funders of mainstreaming work in South Africa. And it's about a process of embedding biodiversity considerations into policy strategies and plans of a range of different actors so that biodiversity is conserved, sustainably used. And a review, a review and reflection on the summary of the key ingredients for successful mainstreaming has taken place. And these are the 6 ingredients. And I'm going to reflect on natural capital accounting's role across these 6 ingredients. So this is specifically drawn from experience documented in the South African biodiversity sector. So natural capital accounting does result in co-produced science-based knowledge products. It's especially if the process is led well. So this is a schematic of the process that we follow to compile natural capital accounts, identifying who is involved in this in terms of data owners, compilers, and users of the accounts, and users being those involved in policy and planning. Then there's a scoping, compiling the draft accounts, but the validation workshops, before that, we set up a technical working group that involved those different role players. And that technical working group is engaged with regularly through the process of the accounts. So we've got users of the accounts involved right from the beginning. The validation workshop at step 4 is also about opening that up to an even broader audience to validate the methodology as well as initial results without releasing the final results until they're compiled. And then once they're released, there's also work to interpret that information and share it through communication channels. And so this process is important for ensuring that we've got products that are science-based and that they are co-produced. So people trust the product before it even comes out. Then mainstreaming, the second key ingredient is around value-based message framing, and natural capital accounting definitely supports this. So mainstreaming works best if there are genuine links to development objectives in the country, and can make a case in terms of changing people's hearts and minds. And the SEER framework provides a measurement framework for environmental statistics that were otherwise less well or more ad hoc in terms of their measurement approaches. And it particularly makes a difference if the statistics are released by the National Statistical Office. So we're seeing that there is higher levels of credibility given to those statistics. It's opening us up to new audiences. In South Africa, people pay attention to what comes out from the Statistics Office, which is Stats SA. And it helps to boost inclusion of ecosystems and biodiversity into national planning and decision making. In terms of the value-based messages, this does not speak only to monetary valuation. So most of our accounts are actually in biophysical terms, and this is because we express value in society in various ways. And what may inspire decision makers to change or shift perspectives can speak to hearts and minds. So like the future of our children. So we value through our legislation rich biodiversity, and we set targets for protecting a representative sample of that. And our land and terrestrial ecosystem accounts and our accounts for protected areas, which are both in biophysical terms, tell us how we're doing in that regard. We also value strategic water source areas and can make the case with the links to their importance to the provision of water and water security. So strategic water source areas are the national ecological infrastructure assets that are essential. They're from where 50% of our water comes from. And we've produced accounts for strategic water source areas showing the land cover change and areas of protection. And the future biodiversity economy satellite accounts will also give us contribution of the biodiversity economy to the GDP. And we can use all of these together to address various value-laden messaging for biodiversity, for mainstreaming. The next 4 ingredients I'm just going to deal with more briefly. So natural capital accounting can build capacity to both compile but also interpret and use information depending on the process that's led. Natural capital accounting can also speak to the 4th key ingredient. It can strengthen working relationships and organizational frameworks. We've got lots of examples of that, but depending on the process. And natural capital accounting is beginning to inform policy and plans, and it can also help to mainstream being ready for like future updates of, for instance, the National Development Plan or evaluation of nature-related risks. We use a lot of the same information to do those sorts of assessments for business or finance sector, but it does depend on process. So we use this slide quite often to say that natural capital accounting is more than a technical process through which we come up with numbers. It's more than also the institutional process that leads to incremental improvements in data and standards and how we arrange ourselves to support natural capital accounting. It's also the policy process that connects information to policy and decision makers and creates opportunities for spreading that information. And it is also the social process. So where we see successes in mainstreaming has been because people have come together, they've had an opportunity to learn about this relatively new work, what the numbers mean, and discuss how it can be used. So there's a robustness, a sort of a social learning process that we have to facilitate in order to see the true value in terms of mainstreaming. So just to cover a few more slides, South Africa has the national NCA strategy. It's a 10-year strategy that focuses on natural capital accounts being widely used. And it also, so this is recognizing the need to put attention to interpretation and use. And we have institutional mechanisms to support that. The technical working groups will involve a range of different role players, as well as the strategic advisory group. And information from natural capital accounts in South Africa that is available at different scales. And I wouldn't have time to cover everything, so this is just a brief summary. Land and terrestrial ecosystem accounts provide information at national, provincial, and district municipality. They also provide information at biomes and terrestrial ecosystem types, accounts for protected areas, report on statistics at national and provincial level and biomes. Accounts for strategic water source areas provide a range of statistics across all levels, including per strategic water source area. The central framework accounts are at the national level because our economic data is not easily disaggregated to subnational levels. And we've been doing water resource accounts that will be released soon that are subnational focus and can be provided at even the tertiary catchment level. And just to reflect on where we've been and how we engage with different levels of government, when the accounts are released, we try to use existing platforms to share information about them. There have been representatives from all levels of government at the accounts for strategic water source areas, and we're getting better at that as we develop more of these accounts. And then the validation workshops for several of these have involved stakeholders from various levels. And then we also hold a national NCA forum to which anybody's invited. So concluding comments, the process of compiling accounts and information derived from them has and will support mainstreaming biodiversity if we put attention to that. Clarifying roles and responsibilities there is important because this is a growing area of work and there isn't enough capacity to do everything. And natural capital accounting is improving measurement of environmental statistics and should strengthen the case for investment in robust data foundations. And yeah, the real impact of natural capital accounting in South Africa, I think, is still to be seen in the future. And yeah, emphasizing that point that I've already made about it being more than a technical process. Thank you for listening and acknowledging many other people involved.
Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you for sharing those insights with us and just taking us through very briefly some of the developments that have taken place within the South African context, and also the progress that has been made across the country in developing these accounts across the various realms as well. That was very interesting. I think we were supposed to move on to our third speaker, who would be sharing some insights from India, but I think she has not joined yet and might be having some technical issues. So I think what we'll do is just open the platform to everyone in the room to share some insights, to share ask some comments, ask questions, open the room to everyone to just engage with the discussions that we've had so far from China and South Africa. I think we'll open the floor to that while we hopefully wait for Dr. Dasgupta to join us, if that's possible, and engage in the process. I'm not sure if we have any questions from anyone as yet, or if people are still trying to wrap their heads around the information that has been shared with us so far. Okay, I think we have a question which I will read out shortly. Okay, we do have one question from Yi, and Yi is asking both speakers that currently how natural capital accounting and ecosystem accounting support decision-making at the local level, and to what extent do different levels of government are using these models in decision-making?
Yeah, I can answer this question first. Yeah, thanks for Yijiang. That for some pioneer cities like China, local government is already beginning running their own GEP accounting. Yeah, just because the central government gives the GEP technical guideline, tells that the GEP will be used for equal compensation and their governance examination. So those pioneer cities, like I introduced as Beijing and Shenzhen, they already use GEP for decision making. And the first is, of course, to distribution the money for equal compensation. And furthermore, for some place, because they want to keep GEP increase, so they will have more measures and ways to keep the GEP increase, such as grow more trees in cities. So they will have a higher, we call it eco sites, which produce the eco product. So that's the logic. That's why local decision makers take GEP more serious. So I think GEP will go even more popular in China among local governments, because it's already in their examination systems. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Han, for clearing that and sharing that response within the Chinese context. Amy, insights from you with South African focus?
Yeah, so our focus has been on compiling a lot of these accounts for the first time, And I can't think off the top of my head of specific examples of local level implementation of these accounts. And part of that is because the accounts are produced at a national level, and they do, especially with the spatially explicit ecosystem accounts, that's disaggregated more to district municipality and metropolitan municipality. I will reflect on that we did try, as part of our early piloting, to do land accounts for metropolitan municipalities, and learned a number of interesting things, including that as you get to finer scales, we pick up more and more issues with data accuracy. And a lot of the more accurate data sets are not sort of national data sets. They vary a lot between different metropolitans. So there's a need to integrate a bigger range of different data sets to compile accounts, and we just weren't able to kind of take that further, other than capturing what we had learned and recognizing that this would require more attention. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Maybe I will just say one more thing, sorry, is that a lot of the underlying data sets that are used to inform natural capital, well, ecosystem accounting in particular, are the same foundational data sets that inform a lot of the biodiversity plans and tools in South Africa. And that's really important in terms of having consistency of the sort of information that's feeding into the different tools that are used at different levels. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Amy, for clarifying that. And I think one thing that I've come to realize about these kinds of accounts and being able to effectively mainstream this information across the different sectors and across different levels is just a recurring point is the value of having data. And I think we'll work with very data deficient areas, and I guess that adds a lot of complexity in terms of how accurate you're able to develop and design those accounts, and also the types of accounts that you're able to do. So I think there's also a lot of scope in terms of trying to bridge those divides in terms of not just biodiversity data, but also census data as well within this context. So thank you very much for clarifying that. Not seeing any other comment or question, but please do raise your hand if you have a comment, if you have a question. We'll happily bring you to the floor. I think I do have a question from my side. I see from the presentations there tends to be a lot of bias towards more terrestrial accounts, and I guess that tends to be a bias across the sector in terms of focusing more on the terrestrial ecosystems. What progress exists currently within the marine realm, and what efforts are there across the different countries in terms of closing that gap, especially given the growing investment in the blue economy?
I could make a first input there. So you're quite right that about sort of seeing more on a terrestrial focus. We have compiled national river ecosystem accounts, but we need to revisit those and expand to wetland ecosystem accounts, which we hope to do. South Africa actually does have experimental estuary ecosystem accounts that the CSR did and published in partnership with others. So those are available. And they also include ecosystem service accounts. In terms of marine ecosystem accounts, those we had started to do some work on at it from a national perspective, and there's also work underway as part of a sort of a broader program on ocean accounts, and you'd have to get the people involved in that work to come and talk about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy, for that. Any response from your side, Dr. Han?
是的，我们在和sorry, I should speak in English. Yes, we are accounting ecosystem services as the the main work of natural capital accounting, but we still are take our energy in research for how to calculate ecosystem asides. So it's totally different. Aside is the stock and the services is the flow. I think it's similar with South Africa, that their database are almost similar. But for the ocean natural capital accounting, it's still we lack of data because it's very new for us. We are still calculating the base data and build the basic database for ocean, especially for those we call it blue carbon storage. That's maybe our first step for ocean research. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Any additional comments from anyone on the floor? You're welcome to raise your hand as well if you want to contribute to the discussion. Comments, questions, or reflections from your own experiences as well are welcome at this point. I think I'm not seeing any comments from anyone. Hopefully I'm not missing anything. If I am, please do raise your hand. Okay, nothing from the floor at this moment. I think just a bit of an update. Unfortunately, I think Dr. Dasgupta will not be able to join us. So my apologies for that and not being able to bring in some of the Indian perspectives into the discussion at this point. But I am opening the floor to everyone else to please engage with our speakers, with the discussion, insights, comments, and questions as well for the next few minutes before we conclude our session. I guess also just opening the platform to you, Dr. Han and Avi, should you want to provide additional information on the work that you've done. And yeah, this is the platform to do that before we wrap up and close off our session.
Maybe I'm not going to provide much additional, but I think that perhaps we could share links to the accounts that have been done, and you could use your networks to share those if that's useful. Yeah, I think that would probably be the most the more useful thing than sort of diving into lots of additional detail. It's really impressive what China is doing with the gross ecosystem product, and yeah, would like to have a look at that as well. So thank you for bringing us together.
Okay, thank you very much, Amy. I think there is some hope that Dr. Dasgupta might be able to join us in the next few minutes. So I think what we'll do is hopefully get some comments and some reflections from the floor while we give it few more minutes for her to join us, so that we can get a much rounder picture in terms of the developments across the 3 different countries. Thank you very much, Amy, for flagging that. I think what we will do is we will share the details and hopefully the presentations with everyone who has attended the session today. Following the session, providing also the links so that you get the opportunity to look at the information and the accounts that have been shared today at your own leisure, and hopefully get more discussion going and be able to engage in other platforms on the topic. I think if that's fine. No other comments from anyone? Okay, yes, we don't have other comments from anyone. So I think what we'll do is give it 2-3 more minutes to see if Dr. Dasgupta is able to join us so that she can give us a bit of a picture in terms of the work that they've been doing in Kochi, India, around developing an investment case for biodiversity through the Interact Bio project.
Yeah, if we have a few minutes, I can just show the GEP accounting platform for our audience. Yeah,
Yes,
do we
please.
still have time?
Yes,
Okay.
please. You're welcome to.
I will show my screen. Okay. It's a recorded video. And this is a platform. Every time if you want to accounting GEP for area, you need to build a project. And for each coin, it makes a different ecosystem service. You just need to select which one it will involve for your project. And the second step is you distribute all the data for different departments or different colleagues, because we assume that different people hold different data. So that's the distribute data for different departments and our colleagues. And here you can see is complication for their uploading. And here is the coin for each different ecosystem service. Once you select them and collect the running, it will running for 0 to 100%. If it's 100%, it means this service is almost be calculated. And once the project is calculated, it's shown as the map. Here shows the centimeter retention result, and you can draw a boundary in the map, and it will give a spatial statistic for this area you are considering more, and give a table of its result. Yeah, I'm sorry, this software is still in Chinese, but it gives the main function for GEP accounting work. And the video is accelerated because it takes a long time to calculate. Also, the speed depends on the data's volume. If it's big data, such as calculated for Beijing, it may take 1 week based on the regular computer system, just like your private laptop, like this hardware status, it will take 1 week. But for small cities, such as Shenzhen, which is almost half of, not half, third, so 1/3 of Beijing, it's take 1 or 2 days to run the GEP for whole cities. Yeah, so that's the GEP accounting system. Yeah, we still have an English version online, but it's still on the beta test. I will try whether we can open it.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And also, I think it kind of goes back to just the value of having data and having the right systems to be able to model and process that data to drive these types of initiatives.
Yeah, I can't open the website right now. Yeah, I will start sharing. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. Han. Not a problem. Thank you for taking us through that and just giving us a glimpse in terms of the behind the scenes and the process of developing those GEP accounts. I think Dr. Punamita has joined us. Just confirmation if you're able to hear us and if you are able to share some insights from India as yet.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. My apologies for being late. I was called for an urgent government meeting, and I just had to sort of kind of reschedule things a bit. So I'm so sorry. My apologies. I'm sure I've missed a lot of very good and excellent presentations. Please do excuse and indulge me for my late coming.
Not a problem. Thank you for making it to our session, despite all of those glitches. I think people have been keen to hear some of the developments, some of the work that has taken place in India, and we've been waiting and hoping that you're able to join. So I'm happy to hand over to you to just share with us briefly some of the work in terms of what came out from the Interactive Bio projects, accounting and evaluation work that was undertaken in Kochi. Sorry.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Most kind of you. So this work was. May I share my screen, or should I just speak?
If you have a presentation, please do share it. You should be able to share your screen.
Trying. So let me try and share. Is it visible?
It is coming through. Yes, it is visible. Thank you.
All right. So do you see it as a full screen, or is it visible?
Yes, it is visible, and it is on screen sharing mode. Thank you,
Okay,
Dr.
thank you.
Victor.
So the effort that was being made in this study under the Interact Bio project, supported by Clay, was to try and develop an investment case for biodiversity-related interventions for Kochi city, which is a city in the state of Kerala in India. To give a little bit of context, Kerala actually is a state which is considered to be among the most advanced states in terms of human development indicators in India. So you get very high levels of literacy rates, high levels of higher life expectancies, and so on. So the expectation would be that this would be a context in which one would be able to relatively more easily find enabling conditions for implementing interventions that mainstream biodiversity. But that is just a context. So what we did in very brief, I will summarize what we did. What we did was we did the study in 2 phases. And we were hit by COVID, because the study was done, initially it started in 2019, and then 2021, I don't need to explain that it was very hard to do field work and to get the kind of data that we had hoped to be able to generate when we began the project. So very much in sympathy with what I heard towards the end of the previous session when I joined about the centrality of data requirements. But what we did try to do is we tried to see if we could develop a methodology and an approach which would bring in, and if not, I won't say compensate, but would help create confidence in us that with whatever data we had, we could we could build a credible, realistic, situational narrative at least. And hopefully this would then create, link up with what kind of values one could sort of generate. I know this is about natural capital accounting. So the links that we saw, we can sort of see with natural capital accounting in this context is typically the conventional way of natural capital accounting would be to do the biophysical part and then to move on to the valuation part. So we, of course, it was the first thing that it demanded was a lot of interdisciplinarity. The second thing it demanded was a lot of community engagement, which was indeed hampered because of the COVID situation. But nevertheless, because Kerala is so advanced in its human development indicators, we could reach a lot of people, including farmers who interacted with us over the telephone. People who responded, who agreed to come together in small groups to discuss and share their views, and several experts, of course, whom we could reach over it.
I have one problem. This thing
Yes.
is not working.
What is not working, sorry? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I couldn't hear.
You must put the settings.
Sorry?
The sun comes out, but not. No, you must put the settings that you are using.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what the issue is, because I am able at least to hear the presentation. So I'm not sure if if everyone else is struggling.
Oh, that's the voice of the secretary of what's the president say?
I can see the presentation as well. I think it might just be somebody unmuted.
So that is the president of the government.
Okay, I think we can sort that on the side. Apologies for that. You may proceed with your presentation.
Thank you so much. So the approach that we had was to develop first to do a very intensive stakeholder engagement. To account for natural capital, to sort of be able to actually understand the ecosystem services that any ecosystem provides. There are two approaches. The one approach is, I think, the science-based approach, which maps the ecosystem service flows, the stocks and the flows related to an ecosystem from the scientific lens. But as an economist, and I'm an economist, what I have also found that in natural capital accounting, that there are different ways of looking at these ecosystem service flows. And ultimately, we are interested in being able to understand the ecosystem in terms of changes that are happening to it, which is what natural capital accounting really is trying to do, which is to say that, whether the asset is depreciating or it's appreciating, whether there is degradation, and so on and so forth of the ecosystem services. It's helpful to talk to a lot of stakeholders, and that's the approach we took here, because every stakeholder seemed to be able to tell us about some particular ecosystem services that that was valuable to them in some particular way. So, for example, one very common service that tends to ecosystem flow and service that tends to get left out of accounting processes are, for example, cultural values. So, although we may not be able to give numbers to it, we thought it was worth trying to do a simple narrative description of it to keep it in focus. So that's that way. So we tried to do a mapping of all the stakeholders. Then we tried who would be impacted or who would have something to do with any biodiversity related intervention for Koji City. Then we tried to bring in certain objective criteria and spoke to each of these participants along those criteria. So we had feasibility criteria, and then on various economic, technical, financial, political, about along, and also obtained their responses on a plethora of interventions that could be possible in the Kochi context. So the idea is, how well can you sort of protect, build up the assets, the ecosystem assets that Kochi city is able to offer, and interventions can hopefully impact them. So I won't go into more details of that. So we had various types of stakeholders, and we had various types of interventions that we were considering. And after we went through our feasibility assessment, we found that what ranked highest across different groups of stakeholders from all these interventions that we sort of asked for their views on, they thought that the most important ecosystems that were important for them, which had biodiversity, strong biodiversity linkages, one was mangrove management, the other was the revival of a particular traditional type of farming, which is called Pokkali farming. And we know, and both are extremely sort of biodiversity positive in the potential for changes that they can bring about. Anyway, so these are the sorts of indicators we had. You can, I'm happy to share the slides later. And we brought in various types of criteria. And obviously it became very clear that different stakeholders would put different values. So sometimes it's easier, because if we know that certain biophysical processes will happen and the ecosystem is deteriorating at a certain pace, or we have the help of science-based models to predict ecosystem depreciation and to estimate. But what happens is, when you come to the second stage of natural capital accounting, when you're actually trying to figure out those investment cases based on your natural capital accounting, is that you're looking at valuation. Here, the approach we took was, valuation can be done for every ecosystem service. There are values. Sorry, not valuation. There are values to every ecosystem service. But from these values, some of these values are quantifiable, some of these values are not quantifiable. But that doesn't mean that the value doesn't exist or should be ignored. And within the quantifiable values, some of them we will be able to monetize, and some we will not be able to monetize. This was our approach. It may be right or wrong, but we wanted to be very practical, and also we wanted to be able to identify synergies and trade-offs amongst ecosystem services. So sometimes the entire ecosystem is seen as something on which one can do one's natural resource accounting exercises. But then within the ecosystem, whether it's mangroves, whether it's a farming system, whether it is a forest, from my at least limited previous experience, I have found that what we tend to sometimes not be so careful about in our empirical exercises is that we tend to forget about the trade-off. So one ecosystem service goes up, the other goes down. And a lot of it then hinges on how we present our values, the values attached to those ecosystem services. So, for example, the value of a water flow, particular type of water flow, may be very high for small farmers, but may not be so high for from a river. For large farmers, who may have access to large groundwater resources, for instance. So we have to be very careful about when we get to the valuation stage. And that is what we tried to be careful about when we did this exercise. So we had risk levels and anyway, what I want to come to, sorry, is that finally when we ended up with these two of the traditional Pokali cultivation and the restoration of mangroves, it was a tough choice because the science-based experts all told us that it was the restoration of mangroves which is most important. And obviously, you know, when I wear my academic hat and when I wore that, that was the most important thing, because I was thinking of long-term benefits, I was thinking of sustainability, I was thinking of local to national to global scale implications of various ecosystem services. But when we came to the traditional system of cultivation, this was something that was so important to a much smaller stakeholder group. But the reason I put this across is that in an ideal world where you wouldn't have economists like me spinning all these problems, you would say, okay, let's do both. But the fact is that there's a resource constraint and an investment case has to be made. And if there is a budget constraint, then one often has to make these tough choices. And natural capital accounting should ideally be able to give us a lens into it, into how we can do that. And that was the approach we really took. So what we went on to do is we did some data collection analysis. We did cost-benefit analysis for Pokali cultivation amongst small and amongst farmers, what it would mean to restore it. And we did a cost-benefit analysis of, not really a cost-benefit analysis, but we primarily use benefit transfer mechanisms to understand the cost effectiveness of restoration of mangroves vis-a-vis Pokali. So we were doing a cost benefit and then a cost effectiveness. That is the return per rupee invested. Obviously, mangroves won hands down, even in the economic analysis. So this is in a nutshell what we tried to do. These are some pictures from the field, but we tried to ultimately say that you restore your mangroves and you try to, at the same time, maybe Pokali cultivation moves into a niche area where you have nurseries which nurture the traditional varieties and, you know, some mix of policy incentivization comes across. I'll stop there because I don't want to exceed my time. But if there's any particular aspect of this that you would like to hear more on, I'm happy to discuss now or later. I'm also very grateful. You know, I work at this institute, research institute at the University of Delhi, but it was really a wonderful opportunity to sort of interact with ICLEI and work under the Interact Bio program. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Desgupta, for sharing those insights, and also I think just for making time to join us and share some of the work that was undertaken in Kochi and some of the considerations also that had to be put in place in trying to make the case for biodiversity within that context. I'm quite mindful of time, but I think I just want to open the floor to anyone who may have a question or a comment for Dr. Dasgupta specifically. We did have a round of Q&A earlier in the session, so I think this is the opportunity to do that. You're welcome to type your question in the chat or your comment in the chat, or raise your hand and then I'll give you the opportunity to share your insights in plenary. Okay. I'm not seeing any hands. Just want to confirm if we have any comments in the chat or okay. I'm not seeing any comments or any questions from the various platforms, but I hope everyone did enjoy getting an insight in terms of what's been happening although a glimpse in India, and just some of the developments that have taken place in India, China, and South Africa as well through our presentations that we've had today. I think what we'll do is just do a bit of a wrap up now. Thank you very much to all three of our speakers. Dr. Han has unfortunately had to leave for another engagement, but I think just to take the opportunity to say thank you to all our speakers for joining us today. Despite the chaos and all multiple engagements that you have, just being able to take this time to share the efforts that you've been working on and the progress that you've made in a rather developing space when it comes to accounting for natural stock across our various levels. I myself have learned so much from the different presentations and looking forward to hearing more information and getting a glimpse of the additional stuff that has taken or was taken into consideration in the development of these accounts and these investment cases, and basically just how we have been able to, through our various countries and cities, make the case for biodiversity and biodiversity mainstreaming across our different sectors and across different levels, especially if we are all trying to work towards achieving some of the ambitious targets and the ambitious goals that we set out in the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework, for instance, and also specifically noting the value of biodiversity in nature and how it underpins a lot of the SDGs as well, because we see a lot of targets and relating to nature within the SDG, I think about 8 of the 17, showing the value that nature has. And I guess calling all of us to really be intentional about creating the space and doing all of those developments that help us drive us closer to being able to effectively mainstream biodiversity and biodiversity considerations across our different sectors. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us. As I shared earlier today, I will be sharing some of the highlights, some of the links and additional resources with everyone who has attended the session following this discussion. And where possible, we'll also share some of the slides as well so that you get additional time to look at the information that was shared today, get more detail, because there's so much we can share within the time slot that we have. So thank you very much to first our speakers and all our attendees for taking the time to be part of our session. We'll definitely keep you posted on our upcoming webinars until the rest of the year, and also just how we'll be able, through the integrated action and on biodiversity project, be mainstreaming some of those considerations and some of the developments within our current city regions across our implementing cities. So thank you very much to all of you for attending. Wishing you all a lovely day moving forward. Thank you.